So today we start a new chapter, relatively speaking, an easy chapter, and yet a very important chapter for us to understand and practice if we are going to be dealing with mediumship with the guidelines suggested by this doctrine. The questions are very important and the answers are very straightforward and very easy to understand. Makes it hard to complement. So I think we're going to be doing a lot of reading. But again, I want to stress that although it's quite simple, it is extremely important. The guidelines suggested here in this book for the practice of mediumship. Okay, who's going to do the reading for us?
If you need, I will.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Chapter 18, Problems and Dangers of Mediumship. The influence of the practice of mediumship on the health, the mind, and children. Question 221. Is the mediumship faculty an indication of some pathological state or simply an abnormal one? Sometimes abnormal, but not pathological. There are vigorous, healthy mediums. Unwell ones are so for other reasons.
Okay, thanks. This is a very important question. Even up to today, but especially at the time of the publication of this book, the beginning of the understanding of mediumship, there are those who definitely did not believe in mediums, and then there were those who believe the majority would claim that this was pathological, that was not normal, there was something wrong with these individuals. So the spirit says over here that it may be abnormal, but definitely not pathological. And by pathological means that there is a health problem, that there is a problem with the anatomy, or there is a problem with the physiology, in this case, the brain, that allows an individual to have mediumship. In case of individuals who may have some pathological, that would not be truly mediumship, would more likely be hallucinations, deliriums, think of that nature that our psychiatry, the field of medicine, can explain it properly. But Kardec says there is, but the spirit says also can be sometimes abnormal. And what does it mean, is it being abnormal? Naturally, when it's produced in a abnormal way, an abnormal condition. So let's say you understand that mediumship requires an altered state of consciousness, a trance, that would be very minimal, almost unperceivable, or it may be very deep. But it follows its normal pathway of the extrasensorial perception of the spiritual world, of this current spirits present. When would it be abnormal? There are conditions that can cause one to have that kind of vision and perceptions, extrasensorial perceptions. Things as crazy as high fever, chemicals, alcohol, funny mushrooms that people use out there. There's many ways that it can produce an altered state of consciousness that will allow individuals to have that perception of the spiritual world. That would be considered to be abnormal because it's not following the proper pathway, the proper state of mediumistic trance that allow those perceptions. Now there is in vogue this DMT molecule, the so-called the the molecule of the spirit, that now you understand it's naturally produced by the pineal gland. Is a beautiful area for research for us. And we have noticed that some of this molecule is present in some of hallucinogenics that people uses. And some people claim to gain mediumistic faculties when they ingested some of those substances, like I forgot the name of the tea that they drink, and in one of this, what is the name of it? Remember, Jean? Sundaime.
Yeah, Santodaime.
Santodaime. It was discovered that this substance is present in those teas, and now we also know that that substance is naturally produced by the pineal gland. So when we alter perhaps even the biochemical structure releases of endogenous substances in the brain, in this case the pineal gland, we could abnormally force a mediumistic trance. Okay. Number 2, or questions? Let's go number 2.
Sorry, I was muted. Can exercising the mediumistic faculty cause fatigue? The prolonged exercise of any faculty produces fatigue. The same happens with mediumship, especially the physical effects types, which necessarily cause an expenditure of fluids. This leads the medium to become fatigued, but his or her fluids will be restored with rest.
Thanks. Purely common sense, right? The prolonged exercise of any faculty produces fatigue. You know, if a piano player sits in front of the piano and plays for 16 hours, you'll be fatigued. If the driver drives for 18 hours straight non-stop, he or she will be fatigued. Any activity that when you do it for prolonged time will cause tiredness. And why would mediumship be any different? There is expenditure of energy just about in every activity that we do, including mediumship. And the expenditure of energy, definition of work, causes fatigue. To that, we can add that in physical effects, the fatigue is even greater because there is not only the mental, spiritual kind of energies taking place in intelligent effects. In the physical effect, we have both. We have the physical energies, we have the expenditure of ectoplasm, we have a lot more energy being expended. So you'll generate a greater fatigue. Mediums of physical effect very usually get exhausted at the end of mediumistic sessions. Number 3. So we're gonna go read straight. We'll comment. If there is any question, go ahead and have the question. Otherwise, I will continue to read, because as I said, the questions are the answers are very straightforward and very simple to understand.
Number 3, apart from cases of abuse, can exercising mediumship in and of itself cause health problems? There are times when it is prudent and even necessary to abstain from, or at least moderate the use of mediumship. It depends on the physical and mental state of the medium, who usually becomes aware of it. When the medium begins to feel fatigue, it is time to stop. Number 4.
Okay, so basically, mediumship cannot be a cause. This is very clear, cannot be a cause, but it can exacerbate or prolong a problem that is already there. Not the mediumship caused that problem, but the problem is present, and the mediumship should be avoided, not to exacerbate that problem, or not to prolong that problem. So much so that in a organized mediumship groups, we ask the mediums, if they do not feel well, if they are going through any kind of physical problem, to abstain from practicing mediumship until it's recovered, and then they can go and proceed with their work. And why would that be? Again, go back to the previous question, because there is an expenditure of energy in that activity. And perhaps that energy is that time necessary for the healing process of whatever's going on in that medium at that time. Number 4.
Might exercising the faculty present more problems for one individual than for another? As I just said, it depends on the medium's physical and mental state. There are persons who should avoid any cause of overexcitement, and the practice of mediumship would be one of them. See numbers 188 and 194.
Okay, I think it's straightforward. Any questions there? Number 5.
Can mediumship produce insanity? No more than anything else could when mental weakness predisposes one to it. Mediumship will not produce insanity where the germ of insanity does not already exist. But if it does, it is easily recognized through the individual's mental condition. And common sense tells us that we must take all the precautions necessary, for in such a case, any disturbance would be harmful.
Yeah, I think that's a very important concept. Again, especially at the time this book was being published, mediums were or fraudulent or they are insane for the majority of the population, except for those who took the time to study before they could comment. With ignorance, they would label the mediums as being frauds, charlatans, or being crazy. So that question was, and it is today still very important. Now, what this priest is saying here is that there are individuals who have the disposition for mental illnesses that may be not being fully expressed yet, but upon some kind of trauma, emotional or otherwise, then that seed of that problem that is already there germinates and presents itself. All of us go through some kind of traumatic experiences in our lives. All of us have a loss of loved ones, and we go to our period of melancholy, we go to a period of feeling down and so what, but we are recovering to a normal state, return to our normal lives. For some, that little event keeps them in a state of depression, in a pathologic state permanently, that you can identify being a pathology right there, and a pathology that the cause was not, let's say, the trauma, but the trauma was what awakened that disease that was already there. Okay? The same thing could be with mediumship. Again, we studied last week and we spoke about mediumship, and Renato brought that up. It may be difficult for a lot of people to deal with the challenges, with the visions, with the noise, with the voices that a medium is exposed to. And if that medium, it is a medium, already has that seed, already has that pathology within it, the mediumship may be that trauma that declares that problem, that disease that is already there. So mediumship is not a cause of a problem, of a psychiatric problem, but it could be the revealing of the psychiatric problem that is already there. The same way that someone who goes through an emotional trauma, someone who receives some kind of physical or emotional abuse, becomes ill after that event. The disease was already there, the event pronounced it, and the person could not cope with those problems anymore. Problems that otherwise most of us would go through, would go to the suffering associated with it, would recover and live a normal life after that. Other people remains ill. Number 6. 6 and 7 can read it together.
Could developing mediumship in children cause problems? Certainly. And sustaining it could also be very dangerous because such fragile and delicate organisms would be very disturbed and their infantile imaginations too overexcited. Thus, prudent parents will keep these ideas away from them, or at least they will speak to them regarding their possible consequences from the mental point of view. Number 7, nonetheless, there are children who are natural mediums, whether of physical effects, writing, or visions. Is the same danger involved in these cases? No. When the faculty manifests spontaneously in children, it belongs to their nature and their constitution is adequate. The same does not apply when mediumship is artificially caused and induced. You may notice that children who have visions are usually little concerned about them. Visions seem very natural, so they pay little attention to them and almost always forget about them. Later on, however, the remembrance returns and is easily explained if they understand Spiritism.
Thanks. So just 2 questions are pretty much one continuation of the topic that is okay to talk about them both together. The first thing to keep in mind is that the young child, as we know, has been revealed to us in the medium's book. I'm sorry, in the spirit's book. Up to age 7 or so, it's not fully integrated into the material world, not fully integrated into matter yet. So it's the child between up to 7 years or so. Of course, it's not an exactly number, but around 7 years of age, will transit between the 2 dimensions of existence rather easily, and we will be able to have the so-called imaginable friend. We will be able to describe scenarios that is not being seen by anyone else, only by that child. And they take it rather in a very natural way. It's not something completely out of the extraordinary, a complete extraordinary for those children. They will just relate, "Mommy, Daddy, my little friend is back here again," and nothing scary, nothing, pretty normal. Usually it goes away. Unfortunately, the problem seems to be more for the parents when they hear that. The kids, they deal with that rather normal to them, because again, they are not so fully integrated yet in the physical instrument, and they have an ability to transit back and forth in the spiritual world, the spirit dimension rather easily. So the first thing to do when dealing with mediumship in children is make sure that you rule out everything else before you call it a mediumship. Let it be a diagnosis of exclusion. And make sure that it's just not the normal process of a child still not fully integrated in the spiritual world. Let's make sure that there is no pathological phenomena going on. Once all that is ruled out, but rule out the physical causes first. Make sure this kid is some kind of therapy, so making use of some kind of treatment. Let's question, is this treatment could be hallucinogenic, could cause this child to have delirium. Let's rule out all those things first. Okay. Once all that is ruled out, and you see that this person, that child is indeed with the open window to the spiritual world, should we try to control it? Yes, we must. Because the question says, could a developed mediumship in children cause problems? And the answer is very clear, certainly. If even for adults, and even for adults somewhat educated in spiritism, may have difficulty dealing with the visions, with the voices coming from the spirits, can you imagine a child? Can you imagine a child that is completely unprepared, uneducated on the topic? It could be traumatic. It could be difficult. It could leave permanent scars on that child. It could create problems with the child trying to abstain from society, from the world, from playing with other kids, functioning as a normal child because of it. So we should try to protect that child. We should try not to let it use it. In most of the cases, there is always an exception to the rules, right? And to begin with, it's very uncommon. It's uncommon that children expresses mediumship. It's rather uncommon. It's not really common that happens, because children have an extra layer of protection, let's put it this way. Children are very well protected when it comes by the spiritual world. And I actually think, of course, me putting my 5 cents here, if it wasn't for that extra protection, most of us would not have survived to adulthood. That's the number of really stupid things that we do and get away with it. But then there are, for those, again, it's a minority, it's very rare, that the mediumship, when you ruled out everything, seems to be such a natural thing for them that it becomes okay. For them, that deals with that mediumship in such an easy way that they can deal with that rather easily. Sometimes, again, as the child mature, it may go away, and sometimes it stays. If you take the cases that we know, we're just going to call those names because we know as being revealed in their biographies, and Francisco Cândido Xavier and Divaldo Pereira Franco, they started expressing their mediumship at a very early age. In the case of Chico Xavier, it seems to be rather comforting, rather easy. Actually was a moment of peace for him when he had those mediumistic events in childhood, and for a devout period for Frank was the opposite. It was rather difficult for him to deal with that. But in rare circumstances, the child receives that ability rather easily, seems to deal with that rather easily, but it is a responsibility of the adults to now educate of that child of what is it? What is the special thing that you have? How do you use that? How to be careful with that? The same way that we would do with anyone with any mediumship and medium, but with a child, naturally speaking, in a way, at the level that that child will be able to understand. That child will have to be very carefully monitored, because even though being extra protected, a medium is always at risk. Okay, number 8. Any questions, please go ahead and ask. Otherwise, just continue reading. Okay, 8. You're mute.
At what age may mediumship be practiced without causing problems? There is no precise age limit. It depends entirely on the physical development, and more particularly on psychological development. There are children of 12 years who would be less impressionable than some already developed individuals. I am referring to mediumship in general, since physical effects mediumship is more fatiguing to the body. As for writing, there is another problem in that children lack experience, and also they may want to practice it alone or make a game of it.
Okay, that's the importance here. They're very important here. That when I say that child has to be very carefully monitored, because kids will take chances. Kids does not have a sense of danger of a mature person, and they will try to do things beyond the level of safety that you would like anyone to do. So if a child has this ability, let's say, to write for psychography, let's pay attention to that child, and once this child writes something, let's see what's being written, to have an idea from whom are those thoughts coming from, make sure that is from a good source. Again, children are actually protected, and likely it will be from something not really harmful, but who knows? Who would know? And in terms of what is the age, of course, and age varies. And maturity of 7 years old from one to another varies tremendously. At 12 years old, from a group of 12 years old, will be different. And I think it's more important the spiritual age than the chronological age, but that means the maturity of that eternal spirit to start dealing with that ability at a younger age. It's more important than really the chronological age. Okay, questions? Number 22, please.
222. As we shall soon see, the practice of spiritism requires much tact in order to undo the ruses of deceptive spirits. If adults are deceived by them, children and youths are even more exposed to them due to their inexperience. We also know that meditation is an essential condition without which we cannot address serious spirits. Evocations made carelessly or for purposes of entertainment comprise a true profanation, and as such They open the door to mocking or malevolent spirits. Since we cannot expect the necessary seriousness for such an act from children, we should fear that if left to themselves, they might transform it into a game. Even under the most favorable conditions, we must hope that children gifted with mediumship will only exercise it under the supervision of experienced individuals who, through their own example, will teach them the respect due to the souls of those who used to be of this world. Therefore, we see that the problem of age is subordinate both to the conditions of temperament and character. Nevertheless, what the above responses clearly emphasize is that we must not force the development of mediumistic faculty in children when it is not spontaneous, and that in all cases it is necessary to utilize it only with great circumspection and never elicit or encourage its practice by frail individuals. We must use all available means to keep mediumistic practice away from those who show the least sign of eccentricity in their ideas or weakness in their mental faculties, for they are obviously predisposed to insanity, which any other exciting cause may develop. In this respect, spiritist ideas have no more influence than others, but should insanity manifest itself, it will take on the character of the dominant preoccupation, just as it would take on a religious character in persons who hand themselves over to excess in devotional practices, but the responsibility would be attributed to spiritism. The best thing to do with any persons who display a tendency towards the idée fixe is to steer their preoccupations in another direction in order to provide rest to their weakened organs. In this manner, we would call the attention of our readers to section 12 of the introduction to the Spirit's book.
Okay, so this is just a summary of basically all the answers to those questions in item 221. So basically, the exercise of mediumship, like any other work, there is expenditure of energy, and every time that you expend energy, of course, there is tiredness, there is fatigue, there is a need to recover that energy, primarily to rest. Some individuals create idea of replace those energies to other means, which is just to me a good excuse to exercise those other means, because the book says really clearly here through rest. All you need to do is rest. If it's possible, we should, when understanding that a child has the mediumistic abilities, once you rule out all the possibilities and conclude that is indeed mediumship, that you should try to keep the child from practicing it. And when it seems to be so natural that we conclude that it would be okay, absolutely vigilance must be taking place, trying to control and monitor how, when, with whom the child is practicing that mediumship. Ideally, it should be not practiced. And in case of individuals which documented the potential of have some mental breakdown or some psychiatric condition, ideally should abstain from mediumship. And one caveat that Kardec adds over here is, if you allow individuals with potential for mental breakdowns, for psychiatric disorders, to always start practicing mediumship, that will be a very negative perception towards the doctrine. It's something that Kardec was always careful, trying to protect the doctrine, and that is a fact. If now everybody practicing, a great number of individuals practicing mediumship demonstrate to have a psychiatric condition, it will be very easy for the enemies of spiritism to use it as a very strong argument against the doctrine itself. So even for the protection of the doctrine, even today, but especially at that time, we need to be very careful that individuals who are not in the best possible condition to practice mediumship should abstain from it. Question, comments? Okay, that was the quickest chapter we haven't done in the history of this SGNY studies. Let's start another chapter. So chapter 19, the role of mediums in communication. Go ahead.
The influence of the medium spirit. 223. During the time in which they exercise their faculty, are mediums in a perfectly normal state. Sometimes they are in a state of crisis that is more defined or less so. This is what fatigues them and why rest is necessary. But most of the time, their state is not otherwise than normal, especially where writing mediums are involved.
Okay. So what Kardec calls crisis here, instead of crisis, we kind of call it of trance, or state of altered state of consciousness. That is, they say over here, he says over here, but you know there is a minimum state of trance in order for the mediumist trance to take place. And he does say that it is more or less defined. Sometimes it's imperceivable that the medium very often seems to be in a completely normal state of consciousness. But especially for the intelligent effects, especially for psychography, it just appears that the medium pick up a pen and paper and start to write. Number 2.
Can written or verbal communications also come from the medium's own spirit? The medium's soul can communicate like any other. If it enjoys a certain degree of liberty, it recovers its qualities as a spirit. You have proof of this when you are visited by the souls of living persons who communicate with you through writing, often without having been called. You should realize that among the spirits you invoke, there are those who are still incarnated on earth. In these instances, they speak with you as spirits and not as human beings. Why couldn't the medium's own spirit do the same? Doesn't this explanation seem to confirm the opinion of those who believe that all communications emanate from the medium's own spirit rather than from another? They are mistaken in understanding that their opinion is absolute. The medium's spirit can certainly act on its own, but this is no reason for other spirits not to be equally able to act through the medium's intermediation.
Thanks. So here is the issue of animism, right? When a medium receive a communication from him or herself, basically. As I like to say, usually I am an eternal spirit now playing the role of Elmo. By I, eternal spirit, I'm a lot more than Elmo. Elmo is just a small fraction of I, eternal spirit. In a state of mediumistic trance with expansion of of the perispirit, I am free from the personality Elmo, and I, eternal spirit, may take another personality that is also me, is also I, the eternal spirit, and that personality, part of me, the eternal spirit, may have a communication utilizing the body that is playing now the role of Elmo. That is animism. If I, as a medium, can receive communication from other personalities, why cannot I receive from one of my previous personalities as well? I could. This is anemic. This is normal. This happens. It's not a crime in any way. It's absolutely good. And let's say that I, Elmo, the ten spirit, playing the role of Elmo with the mediumistic faculty, may have my own issues, my problems as a ten spirit that could be helped in that mediumship meeting. So therefore, why do I not deserve the same opportunities as any other spirits to come to receive help in that mediumship meeting? So it's completely normal that a medium may receive a communication from him or herself, basically. Now, does it sustain the idea that all communications emanate from the mediums? That's extremely stretched of the reality. That one small percentage of the communication that a medium receives may be from him or herself does not mean all communications. And that can be proved by studies that shows that no, that spirit that provide the communication indeed lived in that neighborhood, in that address, were able to prove, and everything makes sense. So that can prove, and we know that that's not the case. Question, comments?
I was thinking here a little bit more in this research that has been done here on mediums here in the US, that they found that when the medium is communicating a message from a spirit, the part of the brain that lights is different from the part when the medium is expressing itself, right?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. That's the latest study that they did on mediumship here.
But in both cases, the medium would be in a mediumistic trance. One would be
when the mediums are in a trance, giving a communication, the part of the brain that is lightened, it's different from when the medium is in a normal state talking.
Okay. It's not the differentiator is when it's not on a trance and when it's on a trance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I wonder if the medium is on a trance giving an anemic communication, if it will show something different.
Yeah, that would be my question.
Yeah. Of course, because they are barely scratching the surface. This is too much sophistication to ask.
Of course.
But I was wondering here, just if they are going to find differences, that will be something, right?
Yeah, that is expecting too much right now. You're right. Only to be able to know to see the differentiation of brain activities, that primarily by amount of blood running to one or another area, they can see that this area is being more activated than others. It's a great development already.
Yeah. And actually, you know, if you want to do a research on the anemic communication, you have to first accept reincarnation, right?
You have to accept reincarnation. You have to accept mediumship.
Yeah, it's too much at the same time.
Just too much. Yeah,
One day.
that's right. Okay, number 3.
How can we tell if the spirit who responds is that of the medium or if it is another spirit? By the nature of the communication. Study the circumstances and language, and you will be able to tell. The medium spirit manifests especially in the somnambulistic or ecstatic state because that is when it is freest, but in the normal state, it is more difficult. Moreover, there are responses that could not possibly be attributed to the medium's own spirit. That is why I have told you to observe and study. When persons are speaking to us, it is easy to distinguish between what actually originates from them and what they are only repeating. The same applies to spirits.
Okay. My impression that the answer over here makes it seem that it's all that easy to make that distinction. I don't think it is all that easy to be able to differentiate if the communication is coming is anemic or come from a third party, from a third person. One thing that we noticed in the anemic communications is a repetition or a continuation of the same nature of previous communications. Of the one usually is anemic, the medium will be talking about pretty much the same issues or continue the same issues, because that's what that medium that medium or that spirit has to deal with that issue. So we had in our mediumship meeting, one of our mediums would have anemic communication that is always refer to the French Revolution, always refer to the abuses of the clergy, with absolutely hate towards the clergy of that time, and was repeatedly that allowed us to conclude with reason there was indeed an anemic process. It was always the same issues, always the same nature, the same epoch. So we can use that to make that distinguish. Of course, language. How's the language differs from the normal of that medium? That may be helpful to distinguish if it's anemic or not. The state of the mediumistic trance of the medium, that's also very important. In order to be an anemic, the medium has to expand, the medium's perispirit has to expand even farther out. So the other personality, so to say, of that eternal spirit can overcome the present personality. In other words, if I'm a medium and to have an anemic message, I'm gonna have to have a further degree of expansion of my perispirit to be less conditioned to the matter that makes up the Elmo personality, so other personality can overpower the Elmo personality of the present. Does it make sense? You understand that? I don't know if I'm explaining properly. Okay, so now look like I've understood. So
yeah, I think it's You got it right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Kardec makes it looks very simple, and I agree with you.
Yeah,
It's
I
much more.
agree. I agree. It's not that simple. So would require a medium to have a much further degree of expansion of the perispirit, and that is pretty much visible when you are a mediumship medium and you look at the medium. You can pretty much tell that that medium is really, really in a deep, deep trance, or not sort of deep trance. It can actually see that just by look at the medium. Okay.
Number 4,
Yes.
since the medium's spirit could have acquired knowledge in previous existences, which it has forgotten in its present body, but which it remembers as a spirit, couldn't it draw from deep inside itself the ideas that seem to go beyond the reach of its present education? This often happens in cases of somnambulistic or ecstatic trance, but there are still circumstances that allow for no doubt. Study the matter in depth and meditate.
So yeah, is going back to the point that, are you sure that it's not, everything is not really anemic? Are you sure that there is really a third party involved in this communication? Couldn't just be that the medium in a state of trance, that spirit of the medium, of course, can retrieve information that is so far beyond that it even seems to be someone else. And the spirit says, yeah, it happens. It happens often. And in a state of somnambulic or static trance, it can happen. But that doesn't mean that all the communications are anemic. And there is well-documented cases that not a lot of them are anemic, and the majority of them are not anemic. It's just a matter of freeing ourselves from our prejudices and study the matter carefully. Five.
Are the communications of the medium's own spirit always inferior to those that may be attributed to other spirits? Always no, since the communicating spirit can be of a lower order than that of the medium, in which case it will speak less sensibly. This may be seen during somnambulism, because that is when the somnambulist spirit frequently manifests. However, it will often give very good information nonetheless.
Okay, so this is a no-brainer, right? I mean, if the spirit playing the role that medium has a good amount of moral intellect progress, when it produces an anemic communication, it will represent that more evolved intellectual and or moral progress as well, which could easily be of a better quality than in a communication from a different spirit who does not carry the same degree of moral intellectual progress. That's a no-brainer, right? Now, the point that is important to mention here, that Kardec makes sure to mention, is that an inferior spirit can also provide very good informations, very useful informations. The fact that, I have to be careful not to offend anyone here, the fact that someone has less moral, intellectual education progress does not make it that same spirit may be able to use very useful, very important information to us. So let's say in the case of something regarded, just because I mentioned, regarded with the French Revolution, and receive a communication of one lower ranked soldier of each one of the sides that perhaps is very angry, is very revolted, and is in a state of still low more intellectual progress, but the fact that he was there, he or she was there, that participating in that event at that moment may provide very good information that will help us to understand that moment better, that will help us to help all the spirits associate with that same event at that moment better. So the fact that they are perhaps morally, intellectually less evolved does not mean they're not able to provide very good information. That happens often. Anyone who is doing some kind of investigation in any field of social workers or social work, let's say criminal investigation, is not going to look only for the enlightened ones. You're going to look for anyone who was able to provide information. And anyone may be able to provide good, useful, reliable information. Okay. Number 6.
Does the communicating spirit transmit its thoughts directly, or does it use the medium's incarnate spirit as an intermediary? The medium's spirit is the interpreter because it is connected to the body, which serves for the communication. And because this link between you and the communicating spirits is necessary, just as an electric wire is necessary for transmitting news over a distance, and an intelligent person is necessary on either end of the wire to receive and communicate.
Okay, so we understand the communication happens through energy, through thought. An approximation of 2 perispiritus, from perispirit to perispirit. Anything to come to the physical body of the medium, to be able to write, to be able to speak it, must pass to the spirit as well. So yes, it always comes to it, but not necessarily to the cognition of the physical brain. In that case, you have an unconscious communication, but the spirit is receiving everything. It may not go to the physical brain. It may not go to the white matter or to the gray matter of the brain, but it has to pass to the spirit. And the fact that in case of unconscious or mechanical communication, the medium will not recall is exactly because it bypassed the cognitive part of the brain, the physical brain, but the spirit got it. Okay, number 7. Unless there's any questions. Yes.
It's time, 8:41.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. We made a lot of progress today. Okay. So we're gonna close with our meetings now, or with our prayers now.
Yes, I'll do the prayer.
Thank you.
Okay. To our Christ, Jesus Christ, to our spiritual benefactors, all that have gathered here tonight, in essence of the mediumship book, learning and understanding and putting all of this beautiful knowledge in our lives, not only to help ourselves, for all those around us. May we continue throughout the week with our studies, and most important, with our prayers, to help all those that are still going through much suffering and difficulties. For those that have gone to the spiritual world, keep ourselves in prayers to help and assist family members that stay behind. We are grateful, dear God, for the learning and teachings that are given to us by our teachers and our mentors here tonight, with Joel and Elmo. May God bless all the teachers, to our sister Usada, mediums and all that have contributed so much to our meetings. We are grateful. May we continue throughout the week with prayers to meet again in our study groups and to continue our studies at home, now and always. We are so grateful, dear God, and we thank you. May we continue throughout the week helping not only ourselves, but all that surround us. Thank you, dear Lord. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting tonight. So be it.